Hello and welcome to this, another episode of Frame and Reference. I'm your host, Kenny McMillan, and today we're talking with Amy Bench, who DP'd 3 films that went to Sundance this year. You've got Mama Bears, Shouting Down Midnight, and Lover Beloved. She also had a 4th film up there, but I'll let her say what it is. Very obviously talented and accomplished filmmaker. Plenty of documentary work on her CV that's really great, as well as narrative. This conversation's a ton of fun. We had a lot of laughs. We talk about a lot of production stuff, cameras, the importance of documentary and narrative in the sense of what you're telling the world, not like scripted. But it's just really great one. Really great talk with Amy. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Amy Bench. That's something that we've talked about a lot on this podcast is like, being a DP is like you have 1 foot in post and 1 foot on set now. Yeah. It feels like it wasn't like that before.
I almost feel the opposite. And maybe it's because I do not really the opposite, but I do a lot of documentaries. Right. Whereas in film school, we were still shooting on film. And so I feel like as a DP, I had a greater responsibility to manage the image. And they would never want to go to the color session without me. And now it seems like to some people, color can be an afterthought. So it's so harder. Strange. Yeah, it's really strange because the director has already seen the footage. And I think people are getting used to seeing S-log footage or, it's like that doesn't bother them. But yeah, I think being in the color grade is like super important. And I always try to be there if I can, but it's, some of the films that I work on are 5-year projects. So right. It's like when you get into a festival, it's like, hurry up and finish the film.
Me and a friend of mine, there's a music licensing company that's doing a film festival, and they're just giving out a bunch of prizes and stuff. So we're like, we'll give it a shot, because they only wanted a 30 to 60 second spec ad or 2-minute, 5-minute documentary or a 5-minute short. So we're like, we could knock that out. And we're going through examples of what we wanted to make for the spec ad. Yeah. And we started seeing, we were like, wow, they really didn't do anything with, like, these are like, Gucci commercials or whatever. And we're like, why do these look? And we look at the date and it's like 2012, and we're like, oh, that was prime. The log looks professional. Right. Days. Everything else is so colorful. This looks really professional.
This looks professional.
We know we shot it on the red because there's nothing going on there.
Yeah, right. That's really funny.
Were you always a visual person growing up? Because I understand you were an engineer at first.
Yeah, I think I always was a visual person. Was really into making artwork as a kid, and even in high school, I took art, even though it was like, in Texas, art is not really considered valuable. They're always trying to scrap art programs, it feels like, including right now, my son's school, they're trying to cut art time per week from the already abysmal amount of art they have to even less. Right. I think to save money, and I can't put my head around why they're doing it, but and
they're replacing it with how to do taxes and shop class, right?
Exactly. We need more. Oh, I think I know what it is. It's to raise test scores, but
oh yeah, we're still doing No Child Left Behind.
Yeah, I think it could be moved on to something else. I can't remember, but yeah, it's to improve test scores, which I feel like test scores in our school district are probably pretty good, and that we need to be focusing on bringing back art and music. Yeah. Because ultimately, compassion and empathy and more creative endeavors, I think, are what make us a better people altogether. So yeah, I was always striving to be an artist. I just didn't know how to do it. I was also good at math and science, so I was sort of pushed to go into that direction. And I ended up working at Eastman Kodak in Rochester, New
Oh,
York. So
wow.
it was that's my first job was actually in high school. I was in the I worked in the photo lab of what is now CVS. It used to be called Eckerd's. So I did a little color grading then. I got to print out people's photos,
Sure.
plus magenta, minus cyan, like. um, so I got to learn a little bit there, but I just loved being around images. And when there were interview opportunities for different jobs, and I saw Kodak was on the list, my school brought in employers from all over the country to interview because it's a pretty well regarded engineering school. And
Hmm.
so when I saw Kodak on the list, I was like, ooh, that would be kind of cool. And so I ended up getting the job and moving to Rochester, New York. And a great thing about that job was that it was a rotational program. So I got to explore different areas within the company. And additionally, I got to learn about imaging science. So they basically brought in 10 or 15 of us a year for what was called the Image Science Career Development Program. And we got to learn how film was made, how the different layers work, all the science behind film technology, and then also digital technology. So I had a pretty good technical understanding of image making before I even went to school. So I think that's why I deep down really understand color grading and understand exposure and working with any format camera because I understand how the sensors are capturing the information. Um, it's not something I think about deeply, but it's just in the back of my head.
Sure. Yeah.
um, so that so after working at Kodak for a few years, I decided that I wanted to be more directly involved with filmmaking. And so I enrolled at the University of Texas at Austin and got an MFA in film production. They don't have
Okay.
specialties like AFI does, but you sort of specialize based on what you do. So it's a directing program. And then several of us would focus on cinematography because everybody needed someone to shoot their film.
Right.
So I ended up learning by doing, and I would also work as a teaching assistant for the cinematography professors. So,
In regards to the like understanding, how images are captured, is there anything that you notice, kind of fundamental misunderstandings that you see popping around where you're like, that's maybe like folk tales that aren't, correct? Because I'm thinking, there's
yeah,
a lot of lessons to learn going from film to
I'm
digital,
trying to
especially.
think. What I think is like, and I think shooting on film helps you see this is just really understanding exposure and where you want to properly expose. Like with film, I would always expose like a stop and a half over.
Right.
Um, to give more information on the negative because the negative is a little denser. And I feel like with digital, since I think people aren't used to read. I think it's because digital's been around longer and people are learning. Um, they're starting to look at their waveforms more and histograms. But I feel like in the earlier days of digital, whenever people were shooting on DSLRs, and other cameras, like it was sort of an afterthought. Like people would just turn on their zebras and like expect that that would be enough.
Yeah.
But I'm a big proponent of always knowing exactly where your exposure is sitting.
Yeah. The whole idea of, put your waveforms or put your zebras at 90 so that nothing blows out. And it's like they start underexposing because the window's too high. Like, you're not going to see out the window. Like, stop.
Yeah,
Expose for the person.
exactly. Yeah, totally. But in documentary, it's tricky because you're filming so I keep my waveform on all the time. And sometimes my exposure is not perfect and I know it, but I'm like in the moment, I have to set it for what I think is going to be the best and adjust it as I can. But I'm also worried about focus and following the story as well. So it becomes like juggling a lot, especially when you're working on more independent things and you don't have a camera assistant or a focus puller.
Right.
which I have had recently, which is really amazing.
Yeah, it's a world of difference.
The world of difference when all you have to do is point the camera. Um, yeah, but yeah. So I don't know if I have anything else to add to that.
That's fine. Because that was something that really, I think was like a lightning bolt moment for me, was when I realized how important half a stop could be. You know, from looking exactly correct to looking absolutely amateur. I don't know.
Right. And I think the newer cameras give you a little bit more leeway in that. So it makes it a little bit easier. But shooting on like reversal film would be, you have to nail it exactly. I kind of miss the days of using a light meter. I mean, there's really not time in shooting documentary work, but sometimes I bring it along just in case.
I still bring my light meter and my color meter everywhere.
Yeah.
Because there's always like a situation where the camera's down, or you're walking around with whatever, the director, and he's like, so we'll sit there. Does this all look good? And I'm like, I don't know. And I'll just start.
Yeah. For narrative,
coming up with it.
Totally. Yeah. For narrative, I definitely use a light meter, or at least the gaffer will have a light meter. Like they're in charge of it, and I'll ask for f-stop readings. Because even if you can see it on a monitor, I think it's still really important to know, because your eyes do get tired too. So you can't just rely on what you're seeing, but you want to make sure that you're remaining consistent, especially as you're jumping around from scene to scene.
Yeah,
so big light meter proponent. I wish I could use them in documentaries, but it's like,
right.
I only have two hands. So.
Is there a camera system that you found is really helpful for keeping you moving quick like that?
I used to use Canon, and then when the FS7 Mark II came out, I switched over to that because it's got a variable ND, which is really helpful, especially if you're shooting on still lenses, which I do sometimes. I've started collecting my own lenses that are either, like most of them are, they're modified still lenses. So I can switch aperture pretty smoothly. But at the same time, if you want to maintain an f-stop, that the variable ND wheel is really handy. So that's what I really love using on documentaries, at least. And the Alexa feels like the gold standard for narrative work.
Yeah, but way heavier.
Exactly. Yeah.
But with S-Log too. Go ahead.
I would say the Sonys are heavier than the Canons, I think, but ergonomically, and I miss shooting on Canon, but I've found that the Sony is working pretty well. Yeah, and I've got to shoot on the FX9 a little bit too. I don't own one yet, but same thing. I think the color is even better on the FX9. Yeah.
They really, with the 6 and 9, they both really improved the imaging. The FS7, obviously, as you know, came out quite green.
Yeah.
Which is a strange. That's the thing. Sony started the digital, not truly, but in earnest, de facto Sony, with the F23 and the 55 and all those,
oh yeah,
they were the digital cinema people, and then their newer ones were
yeah, they don't, not as much. But if you've got a good colorist, you can make it look like a Canon.
Yeah, or an ARRI. Well, that also puts you back into this shoot a stop over thing, because S-Log just loves to be overexposed, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, which is always uncomfortable for me. This feels weird. Yeah.
What lenses are you starting to collect? I was just talking with a guy who had literally hundreds of different lenses.
Oh wow,
this one and this one.
Oh, I wish I don't have them right here. Actually, I do have some. Actually, they're sitting right here. I bought a set of Leica R lenses, primes.
Oh, humble brag.
Oh, what's that?
I said humble brag.
Oh, is that what that is? Yeah, I think I actually have my attention. Like, they're so pretty to look at.
They are.
Oh yeah, I've got a couple. Yeah, they're just pretty. This is the 90, which I really like. I don't know. I like them all. But yeah, I got a set of Leica R primes. I like them because they're really sharp and they have like an interesting texture to them at the same time. And I use them in documentary work, more specifically branded documentary when it's not true verite, like if you're like a commercial where you do have time to change lenses and get different takes. I really love it for that. And then I also bought recently, where it took me a year to get it. It's a rehoused Ingenue 28-70 still lens. It's beautiful. The flare is like just gorgeous. So
yeah,
I've used that a lot on a project that I've been shooting the last few weeks, and it's really amazing to be able to have the flexibility of the zoom, and then it just looks just luscious. I don't know. The drawback is that since it's not a true cinema lens, like the zooms are not beautiful. Like
right.
The transition between focal lengths is not ideal, but sometimes that's okay for reframing between shots. It's fine. But yeah, those are the lenses I have right now.
That is an excellent set.
Oh.
You're
so
right.
I'm hoping I can take that Ingenue for a spin even more. I mean, I had my eyes on the Easy 1 and the Easy 2, but for the price tag, I was just holding off.
Yeah.
And this 28-70 is pretty nice. So I think I'm going to use that for a while before upgrading or adding.
Are you primarily on, because like I've kind of become I used to always be like, you don't need full frame, and then now that this is a C500 webcam, and
yeah, I could tell it's like, wow, I'm just using my MacBook Pro.
Everyone, yeah, that's totally fine. I just my built-in webcam at the time, I didn't have a laptop, so I was like, I guess I got to use something, but and I had just gotten it, and like I said, this podcast was initially a pandemic project, so I was just like, I need something, so I was like, why not the camera I just bought and can't use for anything, way more runtime than record time on this thing. But that 28-70 you're talking about, like, is like the perfect full frame range for me, because I kind of tend to shoot wider. Are you more a long lens kind of person?
I like wide. I mean, for documentary, I like wide. I mean, it really just depends on really the subject matter. You know, for branded stuff, I like to shoot a little bit longer lens, like around a 50 or a 90, to really take advantage of the depth of field that you get with those lenses. It's sort of difficult to shoot that way I find when you're shooting verite docs. So I tend to stay in the 28-35 millimeter range for being in a scene, because I also like that those wider lenses really show you, the viewer, like the location that the film participants are inhabiting at that time. So I do like shooting wide lenses and getting close when I'm shooting documentary, and then shooting longer lenses if it's something branded or for narrative work. I'll definitely use more long lenses, but 35, I think it's 35 and 50 are probably my most common focal lengths for across the board. Yeah.
Because the reason I ask is I've interviewed a handful of documentarians, and the conversation of how the camera, you know, when you're working with actors, they know you're going to be there, but when you're working with documentary subjects, they're always aware of the camera's presence. So the lens choice, positioning always becomes a factor. How does that play into your kind of shooting mindset?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm somebody who feels okay getting pretty close to people. I mean, a lot of the documentaries I film are um, pretty intimate. And so I just naturally get close really early with people. And I feel kind of like I'm just hanging out with whoever I'm with, even though I'm behind a camera. So that's just sort of my natural inclination is to get close. And I find that most people respond okay to that, especially people who are really good in front of the camera, which is what you
Sure.
want in a documentary. Um, so I haven't ever yet been in a situation where I feel like, oh, I mean, when you're shooting like a school board meeting or something like what I've been doing recently, longer lenses are good because it's hard to get close.
Right.
So in those cases, yeah, I would say like you definitely have to strategize about what lenses you're going to bring. Um, but if you're in someone's house, I'm usually pretty close to them, and it usually is works out. I am not somebody who would want to be on that side of the camera, so I can imagine that the presence of the camera is quite obvious. But I find that people will just forget about it pretty quickly, as long as you're respectful of their space and aren't on them the whole time. I tend to move around and not stay in one location when I'm filming, especially if there's multiple people in the room. I'll go for cutaways and things like that, and that gives people space to be away from the camera for a minute. But yeah, the type of filmmaking I do is typically wider lens, closer in.
Yeah. Do you, goodness, do you take into consideration kind of the builds of the camera? Because I've heard that, like, if you were on an Amira and you've got, a 7-inch monitor and an easy rig and you're,
right.
Up close and on 28, it's kind of like, get the fuck,
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, for the most part, I'm filming on my own camera, on the Sony, and it does, it's the rig is bigger now than it was when I was shooting some of the work that was at South by, because now I've got a matte box and using filtration, so it does look a little bit bigger, and so the camera is maybe slightly further away. But yeah, I definitely think it's important. Like, if it's a more sensitive topic or you want the camera to feel smaller, then you just kind of drop all that other stuff. Like I usually do shoot with an easy rig, and I find when the mini easy rig came out, I got it fairly soon, and I was wondering, like, what are people going to think about this? Is it like I used to just be able to hold the camera like this, and it's just me and the camera. But now I've got this like big thing over me, and people got like, it didn't really bother people. I was really surprised. But I will, if I'm ever concerned, I'll always ask the director, do you think it's okay if I wear this? Because it does help me to have that extra support. So yes, I guess I do agree that like having a bigger camera means maybe you can't get so close. And maybe, that's one reason why I stick with the camera that I do.
Yeah. I know Jenna Rocher, I interviewed her a while back. She did the Billie Eilish documentary.
Oh, okay.
Great documentary. She had like a little belt with like a pocket in the front.
Yeah.
And she would put a monopod
Mm-hmm.
into the little pocket. And so she could like articulate from there. And I definitely stole that idea. I 3D printed a little pocket and just like made the belt loops the right size, and then
I have one of those. I used to shoot with a C100, and I would shoot that way before the Easy Rig was out. Like I had a belt, and then I would stick a monopod in it, and I got like a better head for it.
Yeah.
And that worked pretty well. It doesn't work for me with the Sony. The Sony's body is too long.
Right.
What camera? Do you know what camera she was using?
C300, I'm pretty sure.
C300. Wow. Yeah. That's an advantage of the Canons, that they're like a little boxier.
Yeah. The 300 Mark III and the 500 Mark II are like I mean, it's in my opinion, and I don't want to come off as a shill for Canon because I have no connection to them. I've got friends over there, but I'm not like We're not. It's just what I own. But I think it's like the perfect combination of like red body size and Alexa
Mhm.
look. These new ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know I'm going to be in the market for a new camera soon, and I need to, it's like, do I go for the FX6 or FX9, or do I go back to Canon? It's
If you were going Sony, I would go FX6.
yeah.
Honestly, from what I could see, there's not a lot of. This is the nerd version talk of me
Yeah.
talking. The FX9 didn't appreciably give enough features over the 6. It was a really weird move for Sony because
Yeah.
like the 9 came out and it was what, 10 grand. And then
Yeah.
almost immediately after, they basically released the same camera, slightly smaller,
Right.
and made it like 5 or 6 or whatever it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
It's pretty,
think they look the same. I haven't done side by side tests, but
you get two cameras for the price of one.
for real.
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of actually wanted to ask you in this sort of vein, like do you notice any ways that your engineering brain kind of meshes with your art brain?
Um,
Because I certainly like to build my own stuff, but I
yeah.
don't think like an engineer. I think like, I hate annoyances. So I'm
Right.
just
Yeah.
like, this
Yeah.
doesn't work for me. You know.
Yeah. I mean, I guess um maybe not directly. Like, I think I am a decent problem solver because of engineering. I mean, that's what engineering school is supposedly helping you to become better at, is solving problems. Um, and I find that there's a lot of pieces that you have to keep track of, as you probably know. The more gear you get, the more you have to like account for where it is and when you might need it. And so I think it's just more on that level of like equipment management and like remembering, like, I don't know, yeah, remembering where things are. In terms of like, I'm not like really a gadgety kind of person. I will actually like kind of look on Instagram and other websites to see how people are building out their rigs. I'm not really interested in figuring it out myself. I'm just like, oh, what are
Oh
they
yeah.
using? And then I'll be like, oh yeah, that looks great. Okay, I think I'll get that. So I'm more tinker that way with like kind of browsing like how people are setting up their cameras and
Sure. Well,
what they're
even though,
using. But yeah.
I mean, like also like sort of artistically, like, do you notice
Uh,
things that maybe a more analytical mind tends to not overlook, that maybe more artistic folks tend to
like when I'm
ignore?
filming, that is really interesting. I mean, honestly, I feel like I try to lean away from my engineering mind when I'm filming because I feel like one of my strengths is my sensitivity, and I note, like, in terms of noticing subtleties in light changes or subtleties in performance or subtleties in how this lens looks versus another one, or standing over here versus over there to get a shot. I feel like I try to like go as much that direction as I can. My engineering mind could be helpful in that while I'm filming, I'm also thinking about editing.
Oh
I'm not
yeah.
an I'm not an editor, but I'm keeping track of the shots that I'm getting while I'm shooting so that I can make sure to give the editor cutaways at certain points. So I feel like I do have to use my analytical mind at the same time. And I think that's one of my greatest assets, is usually editors are really happy with the footage that they get. Because I think it is a really tricky thing to do when you're filming real life, is to figure out when you can break away and get full cutaways, not just like, oh, I'm going to cut to their hands, but but
Right.
like when someone else's reaction might be important. They're responding to something else, but it's the same reaction that would have happened at a certain moment. So I think thinking about the editing of a scene and keeping track of all of that is where that analytical mind comes in.
Yeah. Or just something I really had to learn was when I got excited about a clip, to not end it.
Oh yeah,
Like knowing,
right.
because I shot a lot of like, I never really did documentary as such, but for the longest time I was shooting concerts. And
Ah,
I would know that, like, thinking like an editor, I was like, oh, got the clip, and I would end it, not giving myself
oh,
any
interesting.
tail or anything,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I try to hold shots fairly long. I mean, I learned that early on. Like, even if you think it's long enough, it's probably not long enough.
Yeah, 10
And
seconds feels like a long time.
and sometimes what people say or do after you think you just got a really great moment is even better. So I tend to if I think I just got something really amazing, I have to resist the urge to pan away to the other person. I just stay on that person because then they might say something even more like insightful or just transcendent, something that transcends like what's already been happening. So it's that resisting that urge to get reactions too early is what I am always working on. But I've been doing that way. And there's a scene in Mama Bears that someone pointed out to me. It's screened last week at South by, or was it the week before? It might have been last week. Yeah.
Yeah,
Where
time has been weird recently.
where one of the protagonists, Kai, who's a transgender girl, in the scene, she's 6 years old and she's asking her mom if she can have a sleepover. Um, and her mom is struggling with this. I mean, the answer is no, and she's telling her why.
Because of COVID.
No, it's because Kai's transgender. And so
Oh,
they're keeping it a secret
I see.
from certain people because they live in a conservative part of Texas.
Gotcha.
And so her mom is like, we just can't risk it, basically. And you can see I never panned over to her mom to hear all of the reasons why not. I'm just on Kai's face, and you could just see her inner like sadness come through on like the little eye twitches and things that
Right.
she does. Um, and I think it's a really powerful moment because it makes you understand how hard it is for her to have a normal life. If this is pre-COVID that we filmed this.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, if she can't, yeah. So maybe it's not as big of a deal to not have a sleepover now that we've gone through COVID and like that's normal. Like my kids have never had a sleepover.
Yeah.
But at the time it was like, wow, like I can't have my best friend come over because
Yeah. It
even
is
though
a
even though she knows I'm transgender, it might just bring up things or things might happen that um yeah, it's a tough
it's
age.
yeah, it's tough to I'm noticing more and more that adults are really intent on making sure kids grow up right out the chute. No playtime, like no time to explore yourself, no time to, as David Lynch says, just have ideas and be weird and like, explore stuff, be yourself, whatever. It's like, no, we have all these rigid rules that happen and you've got to know them.
I
I find incredibly
think,
frustrating.
yeah.
One thing I did want to ask was if you had any visual influences, coming up as a cinematographer. Were there films or directors or cinematographers that you were really into? Were there any maybe like photographers maybe that sort of inspired you and sort of maybe
Yeah.
influenced your look?
Yeah, I would say there's three main people, cinematographers and photographers. I'll list them and then maybe talk about them each. Amy
Sure.
Arbus is one of them. She's Diane Arbus's daughter, who's a famous photographer. Albert Maysles, who is the one of the original direct cinema filmmakers. He did a lot of verite cinematography in the 60s and beyond. And then Emmanuel Lubezki, or
Of
Chivo,
course.
who is like a really gifted cinematographer. Um, so when I was still in grad school and finishing up, I was able to do an internship with Maysles Cinema, and I worked with Albert Maysles, and I just loved his handheld work. I think he was really talented at getting um, getting to know people really quickly through the camera, and his camera movement was just impeccable. So I watched a lot of his films and sort of studied how he did that. Amy Arbus, I took classes with. She teaches, or she used to teach at the International Center of Photography. And while I was interning with the Maisels and working on some of their film shoots, I was also taking photo classes with Amy. And she's really strong on composition. So she's always someone I have in my ear when doesn't matter what I'm shooting, but she's like, look at the edges, look at the entire image. It's not just what you're pointing the camera at, but like, what is the composition of like where, I guess I'm looking at my own screen, and it's like where these little rectangles are ending on the edge.
Oh, trust me. Yeah. The middle of my room is dead center. The little crosshatches are exactly on that little.
So it's like, look at the whole frame. And it sounds so simple, but it's like, not just look at the whole frame, but how is that contributing to the image? And then Emmanuel
Composition is so hard to.
Yeah.
It's not hard, but it's so easy. I guess it's easy to ignore somehow. Definitely took me a long time to be good with composition.
Yeah.
I still don't know if I'm good.
I mean, it's still a work in progress. I think it's always, you just like being an architect. I think being a cinematographer, like the older you get, the better you are.
Yeah.
Your visual acuity just gets stronger and stronger. And then when I was still in grad school, I got to intern and PA and camera assist on the Tree of Life.
Oh, wow.
Alex film that Emmanuel Lubezki was the DP of. And that was just incredible. I learned a lot about lighting, like natural lighting, using window light, using bounce boards, using grid cloth and diffusion. And his Steadicam operator was just amazing too. They shot a lot of that film as if it was a documentary. They were just following Brad Pitt around.
Bummer of a day.
Or Jessica Chastain or the kids. And it was like, the camera movement. I'm always really drawn to camera movement that just feels like it flows like a dance. So I think those have the biggest impact on me and how I shoot today.
Were there any sort of lighting lessons that stood out to you as particularly memorable from that shoot? Because I feel like a lot of people would love to.
Backlight everything. Backlight everything. It was never front light, always backlight. Yeah, I mean, backlight was the biggest thing in terms of. I think it was also like location is really important. So they would schedule scenes around time of day and shoot in the most optimal time of day, which made it really challenging for the actors, I think, and for the crew who were moving gear around a lot. But that film was almost entirely lit naturally. Sometimes there'd be an HMI out the window bouncing in through some diffusion or grid cloth, but for the most part, it was like backlit. Everything was backlit. Magic hour backlit.
The first AD really getting their weight.
Yeah, the grip truck was pretty small on that shoot.
the grip pickup.
Yeah, the grip pickup. So I think it was like that film just always reminds me that like you, especially because I work in documentary, you can make beautiful images without a ton of lighting gear. You can just utilize what you have naturally, because that's what I have to do a lot of times is come into a room and suss it out really quickly. Which blinds should I open? Which ones should I close? Are there any doors I can open or close? And that's actually one thing I did during COVID because of safety reasons also, is like open a door here or there. And like, I was like, oh, the sound person doesn't love it, but it's another way of like getting some interesting lighting going on is by opening a door. It's another lighting source. So yeah, I think utilizing practicals and daylight to your advantage is sort of what I'm always aspiring to do, and remembering that they did it so well on Tree of Life.
Yeah, I have to revisit that film. I haven't seen it in
Yeah, I mean, they
a long
had,
time.
amazing cameras and lenses. It was Ari and Zeiss. I don't remember which Zeiss lenses they had, but they were beautiful. And they shot mostly on like a 22, I think. So it was pretty wide.
Classic for Chiba.
Yeah.
I mean, the Steven Gaynor, the ASC guy with all the lenses, he was saying that lenses are the new emulsion. Now that all cameras kind of look, especially
Yeah,
after the grade, can look kind of the same.
that's a great quote.
Yeah, I know, right? That's why I remembered it. I have a terrible memory. But
Yeah.
lenses are the new emulsion. That's how you can really affect your image and make it unique.
Yeah, I agree. And it's one reason why I haven't jumped to get rid of my FS7 yet is like, in all honesty, it still works great. And it's like,
Absolutely.
I'm just dumping money into lenses and using some filtration, not a lot, to give the image a little bit of a different look. Because yeah, a colorist can do different things, but the texture that you get from a lens is it's not something you can create in post.
Yeah. What kind of filtration are you drawn to?
Um,
Because everyone uses the Black Pro Mist now, but
yeah, that's what
I
I'm
feel like
using.
we're, yeah, there you go. Yep. It's a
Yeah,
good one.
yeah, it's a good one. I like it.
I'm trying to get away from it just because
It's
uh,
becoming so ubiquitous.
it
Yeah,
is the like, especially once the YouTube crowd gets a hold of something, it
yeah.
becomes
Gonna have to look for
truth.
something else. Yeah, right.
Like glimmer glasses started to pop up a lot more, I've
Yeah, I've
noticed.
used a little bit of that too. I don't know if Black Promists have made it to the documentary world as quickly, so
Really?
I don't
Well,
know.
then you're still good
Maybe,
then.
yeah. So maybe I have some time with this. um, but yeah, I think in combination with lenses, I think maybe my Pro Mist will look different than somebody else's
Totally. Well,
thing.
and everyone else is, that aforementioned YouTube crowd is, they're all shooting on Sigmas, like the
Right.
sharpest glass
Exactly.
possible. So there's just
Right.
no texture there.
Yeah, exactly. So they need it.
Yeah. The Leicas. Oh boy.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the films you got into South by. Had you ever been to South by?
Oh, yeah. Well, I live in Austin, so I've been to South by numerous times. I used to volunteer years
Oh,
ago
hell
when I
yeah.
was in college. Um, I mean, I work all like so. I'm a director, and I'm sorry, I'm a cinematographer, and I also direct. So a film that I directed played in 2019. So I got to go to South by like right before a year before the pandemic, and it was an amazing experience. And so being able to come 2 years later, when things are starting to open up more, and it's one of the first major market festivals to be in person, was pretty amazing. So I feel like the energy was similar to 2019. It was a little quieter, but it was also intimate in a good way, because not
Yeah.
everybody attended in person. But it's a great festival. Yeah, I had 3 films that I was a DP on. Mama Bears, which is a feature-length documentary directed by Darisha Kai, about LGBTQ children and their Christian conservative mothers who have gone through a transformation in order to affirm their children. And
Oh,
that,
that's nice.
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's such an important film. And I knew that as soon as Darisha called me about it. I was referred by another friend to Darisha, and she called me before she had any funding for the film. And I was like immediately drawn in. As a mother, I could relate definitely to wanting to protect your kids at all cost. I'm not Christian conservative, I live in a conservative state, so I
Mm.
know or have been in contact with a lot of Christian conservatives and know how deeply held their some of their values are, and so that immediate tension I knew was going to make a great film for people who were able to drop their upbringing and their religious views and kind of do a 180 was pretty amazing. And the film is really wonderful. It just came out, but we started shooting it in 2017. And so actually a short film came out of this project before Mama Bears came out in 2019. The short was called Trans in America, Texas Strong, and it features two of the characters in the film. And that won an Emmy, which was really amazing, for Outstanding Short Documentary. So that was the first project that played at
That was
South
the one you
by.
were referencing earlier.
Yeah, with Kimberly and Kai, and talking about, I was on, filming Kai, talking to her mom about having a sleepover. That was a great film. I mean, the people in the film feel like family because we've spent so much time together over a long period of time. And then let's see, I worked on two more. Shouting Down Midnight, which was also a documentary filmed mostly in Austin, about I don't know how familiar in California you are with the Wendy Davis filibuster or who Wendy Davis is. She ran for governor a few years ago against Greg Abbott. I guess it's more than a few years.
Okay.
In 2013, she ran for governor against Greg Abbott and lost. He's still our governor.
I've heard that's been fun.
Super, super fun. So Wendy Davis sort of made her mark in 2013, or came into the spotlight when she was asked to stand up and fight a really restrictive abortion bill, which feels not very restrictive with the bills that we're looking at right now, with basically making it illegal to have an abortion at any stage after 6 weeks.
And deputizing citizens to be bounty hunters.
So this film is like sort of part historical, part impact that Wendy had. So you get to witness the filibuster. It was basically an 11-hour speech that she gave in the state capitol here in Texas. And through that, she inspired a lot of young people to become activists themselves, whether it was for reproductive rights or immigration rights or other things. And so that's what that film is about. And I started working on that project in 2016. And I had actually been down to the Capitol in 2013 with my little 5D. And that was actually a great camera to film when you've got hundreds of people around the Capitol. And we were interviewing people about what was going on and just capturing all the energy, because you could just move freely. I think I put a little mic on top, got really good sound. And 8 years later, that footage is in the film. So that's the second film.
What's her name? Johnson. Kirsten Johnson. She made Camera Person. And Dick Johnson Is Dead. Yeah. So I interviewed her for Dick Johnson Is Dead, and she was saying that back when she used to do essentially war correspondence, when the 5D came out, it was incredible because now she wasn't video person. She was just there, and could really get some good intimate footage.
Yeah, it's, I hadn't shot with a 5D since, I hadn't shot with a 5D since, I don't even know what year that was, a while ago.
2009. Yeah.
Well, I mean, in 2013, I shot in the Capitol with my 5D because it was so easy to move around. But just this past week and the week before, I was shooting with a small A7 III, I think, a small Sony DSLR for a similar reason, because we've been filming school board meetings in Texas where they're talking about book banning. And it's a way to stealthily record video when people think you're just taking photos. Not because you're doing anything terrible, but it's a little less distracting because we are allowed to be there. But I just find that when the director is, prioritizing content over image.
A7 takes great images though.
Yeah, it does. It's just, you know, it's hard when you don't have a monitor. You're basically just like looking at this screen that's like this big.
Yeah.
So keeping focus and all of that is, especially when I'm so used to shooting on a bigger camera, it's a bit of like a learning curve to go back to shooting that way. But it is a really handy tool to be in environments where they may not want a big camera because they'll find it distracting. And so it is kind of a game changer. Yeah, it still is a really great tool.
Yeah. And you said there was another film.
Yeah, there's another film called Lover Beloved, which is basically a performance by Suzanne Vega. She was a rock musician. She still is, singer-songwriter from the 80s. She's actually somebody I used to listen to when I was a kid. And she's still performing.
How was that?
It was really cool. I mean, when I first heard about the project, I was really excited because I was like, oh, wow, it would be so great to work with her. She's so talented. At the same time, it was a little scary because we were basically turning her one-woman play into, or one-woman stage performance into a film. And we only had 6 days to shoot this hour-and-a-half performance, or maybe 2-hour performance. So the script was edited a little bit. And, you know, we shot all in a makeshift studio at Austin Film Society here in Austin. But it was great. I mean, we basically got to film her performing 6 or 8 songs of hers that she had written about Carson McCullers, the Southern author, and then giving lectures about Carson McCullers, about her life and feelings on humanity and love. And it was really fun. It was, you know, we only had 6 days to shoot, one camera. But we did that on an Alexa and used Cook lenses. Oh,
nice.
To, you know, bring us back to the time period in which Carson McCullers lived, which this film takes place in the 40s and the 60s. So I thought, you know, we didn't have a budget to get 2 sets of lenses.
Right.
We couldn't have different lenses for I think that would have been an ideal. Maybe use Zeiss lenses for the 60s and Cooks for the 40s or something. But I just decided let's use the Cooks. And I think we used Pro Mist in addition on some of the earlier stuff, just to give it a little bit softer feeling. And then the 60s were a little bit sharper. But yeah, I think the film came out beautifully. It was a really quick shoot. And I think we shot 3 lenses for each time period. You know, I shot a little tighter, used tighter lenses in the 40s, a little softer in the background, and then a little wider and closer for the 60s when she's getting older, and slightly less flattering lenses. So
that's usually the opposite of what people would do to enhance the natural. I have no euphemism. Aging process. Yeah. I've come. Some people vintage.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it was just a choice that I made and with the director, and we didn't stick to it 100% because there were technical restrictions too, like how big is the set, where is the camera, like does this lens work? But for the most part, that was sort of where we started with, and got to play with a lot of color and gels and lighting, the strobes and stuff. It was really fun because we got to be really creative with that.
Has LED lighting kind of come into your sphere of influence yet? Like, are you still more kind of in the traditional hot light keynote kind of situation?
So yeah, it's interesting. For this film, we used a lot of tungsten for budget reasons, but also authenticity. I really like the feeling of tungsten. So our main light was a 2K tungsten, and that was usually her key. We would bring in LEDs for some of the strobing effects. Like we had curtains behind her in some of the scenes. And if we wanted to, we could do like a rotating color, you know, you could program different different color. Gosh, I don't know what the color values are called, but like
RGB.
the RGB values. You could type those in, and we would set those like on a loop. And so we used LEDs for special effects lighting, for things like that. But we used some really old vintage lights that we even included in the background that were all tungsten. A Barger light was one of them, and some scoop lights that are really beautiful.
Yeah, there's something about tungsten that just still.
Yeah, it's so beautiful.
Too
but
good.
for documentary, I do use LEDs because they are much more compact and a lot brighter for the wattage. So
Not gonna blow someone's house up.
I still have like a tiny set of tungsten lights that I bought right after college and have barely used, but sometimes I'll use them for the background or something to simulate a lamplight or something. That I find them still, like, I have this tiny Rifa light that I really like. So I'll bring it along, and I don't use it that often, but when I do, I think it's really lovely. But so I think tungsten are still really great, especially if you're trying to do a piece that's more vintage or a different time period than today, because LED lighting definitely feels more modern to me.
Yeah. Well, and like Kino started the trend, but with LEDs, it's just so easy to get a soft source close.
Yeah.
But if you've got the room and air conditioning, nothing beats a tungsten through
exactly,
half grid or something like that, full grid.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's true. I wish we could shoot with tungsten more often, but
it's way cheaper. You can rent a 2K for like $20 a day.
Yeah, exactly. It is way cheaper. It just is like more work.
Yeah. And you gotta have a Jenny sometimes.
You need more outlets.
Yeah.
Or more circuits. Yeah. Or a generator.
And an experienced gaffer.
Yeah. Well, hopefully I always have an experienced gaffer, but yeah, like sometimes on docs, you're kind of like relying on someone else to plug in the lights.
Yeah.
It's not a gaffer.
It's Kevin. Yeah.
What's that? It's Kevin?
It's Kevin from down the street. He's plugging
Kevin from down the street. He's plugging in the light. Hopefully he's secure.
Yeah. So with all three of those films at Sundance, at South by, what was that? So I've never been. Were you just like, I'd really love to, but were you just like running around town signing autographs and high-fiving everyone, or like did you feel very
well, I have a secret fourth film. I don't know if I
mentioned. Really?
I directed a film that played at South by as well. So I had
Did you have your own programming I
needed an assistant, believe me, I did, but no, I've been working on a series of animated short documentaries, which seems sort of strange for a cinematographer to be making animated films, but it's utilizing a different part of my brain, I suppose. And getting to work with animators is great. Like getting to work with someone who's really strong visually in a different medium is really fun for me. So I basically, the first 4 days of South by, I had a premiere every day. None of the screenings overlapped, but I did miss, there were a panel that I was asked to be on that I wasn't able to do because I wanted to go to the premiere of one of the projects that I worked on. And, some networking things I probably missed out on because I just wanted to enjoy the experience, like of celebrating a film that you've worked on for 2 to 5 years.
Totally.
So and things are a little spread out in South by. It was nice that I live here and have a car because I could drive and give friends rides places, because the Uber situation or Lyft rideshare is
atrocious.
It gets really tricky during South by. Some people were waiting for a half an hour and then just gave up for their ride to come. But yeah, so this was a particularly busy South by for me, which is why we're talking after the festival.
Yeah.
It was really tricky to have much time more than changing my outfit every day and making sure I ate something.
Yeah, for
It
real.
was a whirlwind, but it's a really fun festival. I enjoy the programming that they do. Um,
Yeah, it's I'm just thoroughly impressed by that. Like, has anyone done that before? Has anyone had like four films all in the festival at one
I
time?
don't know. I don't know.
We
It,
should send you a plaque.
yeah. Yeah, I was in one Q&A. I think it might have been the last Q&A that I did for the festival, which was Thursday of last week. Um, and Janet Pearson, who is the head programmer, she runs the film fest. She's like, Amy, didn't you have another film here? I was the DP on this film. I was like, yeah, I did. I had a few other films in the festival.
She's like,
I,
huh?
didn't, I didn't name them all because it was a Q&A for one of the films, but it was, at least she knew something was up, that I had more than one film. But yeah, I don't know how many people other than the people whose films I worked on know.
We got to figure that out because that is like, you could be like, oh, Emmy nominee, whatever. I would put had four films in a festival at once, like, or Emmy
Four
winner.
films in
Sorry.
1 year. Yeah.
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 You know, I had heard a interview you did where you had touched on the idea of making films as opposed to advocacy pieces, and
Oh,
I was
interesting.
I was
Yeah.
wondering if you could kind of expand on that because I think it really is important
Yeah.
to make a film that isn't. I feel like it's easy to point blame when you're
Hmm.
making a documentary, as you
Yeah.
seem to tend to make, versus trying to educate or whatever it may be.
Right. I mean, I think ultimately, even though I work in documentary primarily, I still have a very strong interest in narrative and am welcoming more narrative projects. And the documentary projects that I work on, while some or all have a social justice point of view or purpose, I think ultimately telling a good story is the most important part of that. And letting people in on the lives of others is sort of what they do. And so it's all about spending time with strong characters who are overcoming something or trying to overcome something, and the internal and external struggles that they face. So every film that I work on, whether it's narrative or documentary, I want the narrative element to be the strongest and the visual element to be as strong as it can be, which I find can be challenging in a documentary because you got to be there when you have to be there, no matter what the lighting looks like. Sometimes I do
Right.
as much as I can. But I think honestly, maybe that's one reason that in my directing work, I've gravitated towards animation, because it's a way to add that visual control back when I think there's a certain amount of it that's possible in a verite film, where you're living with people in their daily lives. But in an animated film, you can tell a story and the visual language is limitless.
Mm.
You don't have to worry about what people are wearing or where you're able to interview them, or um, you just do it and it's like a black box, and then you have their voice, and you can create the world based in like sort of based off of reality, but goes kind of beyond reality. So the documentaries I've been directing, like I want them to feel like a narrative, like you're not quite sure if this really happened or if this is a story someone just wrote or made up. I mean, there is an authenticity to them that you can hear in the people's voices. But at the
Yeah.
same time, the story is so powerful and the storytelling so visual that whether you like documentary or animation, you still get swept away. That's sort of my ultimate goal, is that anyone will like this film.
Right. Yeah.
You care about, so my directed films are about refugee experiences and finding peace and safety in safer, more stable lands like the United States. So whether or not you are interested in the refugee crisis, you're still going to be really moved by the films that I make. So that's sort of always in the back of my mind. You're always making a film. Um, I don't want to be part of projects where the sole intent is to change this law or do this thing. While that might be very important, um, I think in order to do that, you need to tell a compelling story so that people that don't have those lived experiences can live them through your film.
Yeah. Because that's something like when you were speaking about the parents who didn't want to allow the sleepover to happen. It's like how do you get those people to, because by nature being small c conservative means you don't want things to change. You want things
Yeah.
to stay the same. And so it's hard to, it seems, get people in that small c conservative mindset, no matter what the subject being, to come to your side, because by definition they don't want to move
Yeah.
from their position.
Right. But I think by showing the struggles of this mom who wanted to, she had already shifted her mindset around accepting that Kai was a girl in the year prior to that. But now it became a concern of safety because we filmed that during what was called the bathroom bill in Texas
I remember that. Yeah.
2018, end of 2017. There were bills against using the bathroom that didn't match your gender at birth, the gender assignment that you received at birth. And so that's what Kai was experiencing at school. And some of her close friends knew, the administration knew, but it was still, their family was being attacked in the school district in which they lived. And so I think it broke Kimberly's heart to say, no, Kai, you can't have a sleepover. It was all about protecting her and how kids can be mean. And if they end up seeing each other in the bathroom, could see something that makes them feel uncomfortable. And then the rumors can go around school. And so I think she was really smart in wanting to protect Kai from any teasing or harsh treatment that she would get on top of what was already happening to her. And I think that's important for people to see who may think oh, people just openly embrace transgender children. They openly embrace LGBTQ. It takes time. It took time for Kai to be able to tell her mom, no, mom, I'm really a girl. It takes time for Kai's mom to come to understand that. And I think it's important for people who are not on that side of acceptance to see that everybody has struggled with it. And it's not just an easy, acceptance. And it's a struggle that people deal with every day. And I think it shows no, this family didn't choose to be a family with a transgender child. It's something that they are tackling every day because it makes their lives so much harder. Why would anybody do this to themselves?
Right.
I think the humanity is what is important for people to see in these films. And that's how you get change, is when people have a deeper understanding of how complicated these relationships are, and what everyday people struggle with who are LGBTQ or who have LGBTQ children. It's not just night and day. One day I have a boy, then I have a girl, and I move on with my life. It's very complicated. It's very hard. And that's why we need to support them and not blame them for using a certain bathroom or wanting to play sports when that's just a small piece of their life.
Yeah. Well, and it's, as you're saying, making a compelling story about a human is far more valuable and probably what do you call it? Makes people think the way you want them to think, whatever that word is. Than a political message or grandstanding or whatever it may be.
Exactly. Yeah, people don't want to be told what to do, but if you can move them in some way and get them to understand the life experience of another person, hopefully that will give them the understanding. Because I think a lot of hateful rhetoric and misunderstanding is through lack of knowledge, lack of
Yeah.
exposure, and these films hopefully provide that to people. I mean, it is hard to break out of that bubble. You know, people who go to film festivals are probably usually younger, liberal, more open-minded, but eventually these films will get into churches. I mean, especially Mama Bears, they're taking them to churches that are considering being LGBTQ affirming. And while those might be the most liberal churches in a certain denomination, there are still going to be people who need to be swayed. So I think the change happens slowly over time, and maybe initially with people who are more liberal, and then eventually like gay marriage, it becomes accepted.
Yeah.
So hopefully transgender rights will follow suit with it's just normal.
Well, you know what's funny is it all seems very. I can see how it seems the trans rights thing seems very recent because recently it's just been talked about so much. But I went to so I was in high school. I graduated in 2007. I had a trans friend in 2007 who is a trans woman now, and so that idea wasn't strange to me. And also, we were such a small school that like it was just like you couldn't judge someone for any choice they wanted to make, let alone transitioning or fucking wearing a new hat, whatever it was. It was just like, oh, that's you now, cool, Yeah. So.
But for the rest of the country, did you grow up in California? I
did, and I grew up in the Bay Area, so
you probably
a little more open.
The most open.
Well, this was a religious school I went to. I wasn't their religion, but it was a religious high school.
So I think it's just taking a long time and trans issues are becoming much more mainstream. So I think films like this, where you can see a cute little blonde girl who's trans, will really kind of. I think the fact that she is so young is a good example of how it's not a life choice. It's just, she was born that way. So
I can't not hear like, oh, rah, rah, every time I hear Born That Way, just like Lady Gaga just pops up in my head. And, primarily musician. So I've actually kept you a little longer than I should have, so I'm gonna let you go. But at the end of it's been really fun.
Yeah.
At the end of all these podcasts, I like to ask the same two questions.
Okay.
One of them used to be or is, if you were programming a double feature with your film, what would be the other film? But you have, I think, 11. So maybe.
Wow.
So maybe if you were reprogramming a festival or something, what would be the analogous films that you would want people to watch before your films?
Oh wow, that is a tough question.
It used to be, what's your favorite film? That's way stupider.
COVID
Citizen
has
Kane.
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay, so for each film list, watch this film and then watch.
And then your film, which this is a toughie. I should have thought of this better.
I wish you would have sent me this question ahead of time.
I didn't think about it until I literally didn't think about it until just this second.
This is the kind of question I need to put my head to the.
Yeah.
I mean, well, Mama Bears is easy because I think if you want to watch Trans in America, because it's only 18 minutes, and then you watch Mama Bears. I don't know if that's too much, Kimberly and Kai, but I feel like it gives you a window into the struggle. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I really hit you over the head with this one. I should fuck that up.
I mean, my More Than I Remember, the short animated film that I made, you can watch my previous film, A Lion Birds Cannot See, because it's another film about the journey of a young woman coming to the United States for a more stable life. So you could watch that, A Lion Birds Cannot See, and then watch More Than I Remember. For Lover Beloved, I don't know if it would be watching a movie, but I would say watch some Suzanne Vega music videos and read a couple chapters of The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. before watching Lover Beloved. Or you could actually, I think, I didn't watch any of the previous film. I think they did they make a movie, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter? They made a few of her novels into movies in the 60s. So I'd watch one of those. Before Shouting Down Midnight. It's got Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. It's basically about her running for office.
Oh, word. Okay, cool.
It's a really great film. And it's that sort of like following someone who, she was a bartender and then she becomes representative.
They made that like literally following her as she ran, right? So they had her footage of her bartending and shit in there.
Yeah. It's incredible.
Cool.
And Shouting Down Midnight is basically the impact that a politician can have on other young women. So I feel like those films could go hand in hand.
Totally.
Yeah.
My apologies, but great answer.
Thank you.
I'm actually going to tack on a second question. It's very easy. I ask every documentarian this: shoe recommendation.
Shoe recommendation.
Because documentarians are always on their feet. They're always carrying heavy cameras. The backs need support.
I wear Vionics.
Vionics?
Vionic. The tennis. I wear it. It's a brand that has like really good arch support, but they make really cool tennis shoes. Gotcha.
Yeah, so a little behind the curtain is every documentarian I ask that question, and I have an Amazon wish list. Not that I'm going to buy them all, but just like,
shoes?
Hoka's have been recommended a bunch.
Oh, okay. I haven't worn those yet.
Yeah, huge.
On Cloud is another. Is it On Cloud? I think it's On Cloud. It's a Swiss shoe. They they're not as like crazy looking as Hoka's, but somewhere in the middle.
And then let's see, Hoka, Blundstones, which I personally wear. Those are the Australian boot, just the pull-on boot. Those are great. La Sportiva.
What's that?
Italian boot, I think, something like that.
Oh, great! I'm gonna write that one.
Sounds real exciting. And then there was some Adidas, something or another.
Adidas. Well, Vionic is new then.
I can text you the Amazon list.
Oh yeah, that would be awesome.
But yeah, and then finally, is there a piece of advice or maybe a quote you read or something in that sort of sphere that has stuck with you as a filmmaker and as a cinematographer that you think is sort of maybe not like the quote, but just one thing that kind of stuck with you? Don't give up is a good one.
Who sings that? I'm not a singer, so I don't know if I can do it. Don't give up. It's a long, windy. I found it to be a very long and windy road, filled with a lot of questioning. Is this going to work out? But if you care about it, then don't give up. Listen,
this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
I agree.
And next time you program your own film festival, we'll have you back on to talk about those films.
Okay. Thanks, Kenny.
Frame and Reference is an Owlbot production. It's produced and edited by me, Kenny McMillan, and distributed by Pro Video Coalition. Our theme song is written and performed by Mark Pelly, and the F&R Mattbox logo was designed by Nate Truax of Truax Branding Company. You can read or watch the podcast you've just heard by going to provideocoalition.com or youtube.com/owlbot, respectively. And as always, thanks for listening.